What is going on, guys? And for the final time this year, I'm covering an NBA Live Before Lock for a regular season game. I'm going to be off tomorrow, as I usually am on Sunday, and there's nobody that I would rather close out talking about the NBA regular season with than Ryan Pack himself. Ryan and I are friends. We've not done very many shows together this year. We don't have all that much overlap, but we're bringing you guys some of the best information possible that we've got at our disposal for a Saturday. So as you guys come in, like the video, subscribe to the YouTube channel. Ryan, what's happening?
Yeah, excited to do a show with you, Greg. It's been a minute. And unfortunately, we're on the last Saturday of the regular season.
Yeah.
It's wild times in the NBA. Wild times. It feels like the preseason-esque rotations, lots of variance. And hopefully in this three-game slate, we can pick our way through to the top.
Yeah, and we've already got right here in chat. Vic David Figueroa is saying, if anybody has a gambling problem, 1-800-GAMBLER is available. That goes to all of us who are playing this slate. There's no reasonable-minded person who's like, this is a good NBA slate to play. But we have to. This is what we do. We grind out all of the slates. But also, there is some really easy ways that you guys could go about making some money today. And that's by signing up at Bet365. They are the sponsor of our show today. And this is a great deal. So what Bet365 has going right now is you make a deposit, minimum of $10. You place a $1 bet on anything, and it pays out $200 in bonus bets. The one catch here is that it's only available in 4 states right now: New Jersey, Colorado, Ohio, Virginia. But if you guys are in one of those states and you've not taken advantage of this offer yet, go ahead and do it, because there's a lot of risk involved in today's NBA slate. There isn't with this Bet365 offer. So go ahead, take advantage of it. If you or anybody you know has a gambling problem, call or text the number that Vic David Figueroa put there in the chat, 1-800-GAMBLER. So let's start talking about just the overarching ideas of this slate, Ryan. And let's tell people which teams have some sort of significance or stuff to play for, because I've been bringing this up a lot on shows lately towards the last week or so of the regular season, is that we really do need to consider some more of the narratives that we don't necessarily consider in the middle of the regular season, because there are certain stuff like teams that don't have shit to play for, and maybe they'll do something like play their star player only 12 minutes in the first quarter and take him out, like we saw Luka yesterday. Before today, we've got Denver and Utah playing. We've got Portland and the Clippers playing. We've got Minnesota and the San Antonio Spurs. And so of these teams, Ryan, who is the team you are most confident in is going to be giving their players at least close to regular rotation runs?
So it's really important to keep an eye on all things seeding, especially the last 48 hours of the regular season. And the way things stand right now, in the play-in games over there in the Western Conference, because the Lakers now are the 7 seed, the Pelicans are the 8. Minnesota, who's on the slate today, is the 9 seed in a battle against the 10 seed Oklahoma City Thunder for over there. It is going to be very interesting to see who suits up. My guess is Minnesota in a San Antonio matchup is just going to make sure they guarantee themselves a win, and then we'll kind of fingers crossed and see what happens tomorrow. That'd be my guess. And then everyone else on the slate, Denver and Utah, sure, all these guys are playing Jokic, Murray, and Porter. It could be just to get like a little cardio practice, a real game scrimmage, as they haven't played together in some time with the Jokic injury that Jokic has been dealing with over the last couple of games. So I'm skeptical about Denver. What's Denver going to look like? And the other team, for sure, I think the Clippers are going to roll out to make sure to win. They have a pretty simple playoff scenario from what I last checked.
Yeah, so if we look at the Clippers right now, the other thing too that could introduce another level of weirdness is, does anybody in the West want the 5 seed? Because if you're the 5 seed, you are going to get a first-round matchup against the Phoenix Suns with the Suns getting home court advantage. If you are the 6 seed, you are going to be playing the Kings with the Kings having home court advantage. I would much rather be playing the Kings in the first round than the Suns. So I'm kind of interested to see how teams are going to approach this over the next couple of days, but kind of a fun wrinkle to throw into this. And I'm wondering what you would be doing if you were these teams.
Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah. If you had the choice, would you be trying to win to get the 5 seed? Or would you be okay with losing while understanding that that risk could mean that you drop to the 7 seed and you find yourself in the play-in tournament?
All things put together, I don't want to play the Phoenix Suns. Whatever I need to do, I don't want to be playing the Phoenix Suns. I don't want to be playing Devin Booker, Kevin Durant, Chris Paul, DeAndre Ayton. And their bench looks pretty solid now. All things put together, they look like a pretty deep team in my opinion. I do not want to play the Phoenix Suns. Whatever I need to do, if I need to sit my starters in the second half so the other team wins, I don't want to play the Suns. I sure that might cause some ruffle the feathers with the competition committee. But I mean, let's be honest. You want to play a Phoenix Suns team who have all-time greats across the board, or a Kingston who are young, exciting, a great offensive force, but no such playoff experience. Mike Brown, a first-year head coach, obviously has been under the Steve Kerr hierarchy there. Give me whatever matchup I want, sans the Suns. And now we also got this injury situation with Memphis. Steven Adams was set to return at one point. Now he's out for the whole playoffs with a knee injury. I mean, the Memphis team doesn't look as solid as it once did early on in the season. Obviously, a lot of off-court drama there. But going back to what you said, I do not want to play the Phoenix Suns.
Yeah, and so that's going to come into something I talk about later when we get to the Los Angeles Clippers. They are the second game in the slate we have talked about being 17-point favorites at home against Portland, because I do wonder how much they're really going to be pushing their starters in that spot. Any other thoughts you have just in general about the slate? And it doesn't have to be anything. If not, we'll start going into the games by game by game. But are there any overarching type views that you have about today's slate and the games in general?
Yeah, it's a short slate. Kawhi Leonard is playing on the back-to-back, so keep that in mind. I know it's the first back-to-back he's playing this season, I believe. I could be mistaken there, but that's pretty important news for Kawhi Leonard and his health and the Clippers team. But outside of that, it's a short slate. I think there's some very intriguing value, some shoe-in value as well. So we'll see how this irons out by the time lock comes around.
All right, so let's get into it, starting with what I would consider to be relatively unexpected news. We got the Denver Nuggets on the road against the Utah Jazz, and Denver locked into the 1 seed. No matter what they do, no matter what Memphis does, this is a Denver team that I'm pretty sure we're looking at being. Am I mistaken there? Or are they? Oh, they still need one more win, correct?
They have clinched home court, I believe.
Okay, so they are. I wasn't. So they're a game and a half up on Memphis, but I wasn't sure if they have the tiebreaker against Memphis.
I believe they do, because they beat them twice, I want to say, or out of the 3 times they played.
All right, so Denver Nuggets versus Memphis Grizzlies, and let's see what has happened when they've played each other this year. So the Nuggets and the Grizzlies games this season. These are the fun parts of the slate to me also, is trying to figure out what some of the seeding is and what some of the implications are. Have the Grizzlies, because I see they split the last one. Yeah, Nuggets 1 seed is locked right now. So this is a game that really means
that's
nothing.
pretty sure. Yeah, they have the one. Yeah, home court for the Western Conference Finals.
So we just got news that there's going to be Nikola Jokic playing. We've got news Jamal Murray is playing. We've got news that Michael Porter Jr. is playing. Here's what I make of this news, Ryan. I'm curious what you think about it. I think this makes Denver the least appealing team to target on the entire slate, because I very highly doubt that we're going to be seeing extended minutes out of Nikola Jokic or Jamal Murray or Michael Porter Jr., even guys like Aaron Gordon. I think we probably see these guys play about one half. That's my reasonable expectation. I think they play about a half. And what that is going to do is it's not going to make them interesting, but also these guys playing at all takes away any kind of appeal that we would have had for some of these other guys like Reggie Jackson, who is getting some starts and playing extended minutes before, or even, some of the bench guys like Peyton Watson, Jeff Green. But what is your expectation for the core guys from Denver? Nikola Jokic, Jamal Murray, Michael Porter Jr. Do you have a good read on how many minutes you think these guys play?
I don't have the best read just because of the situation, right? They're locked in the home court for the Western Conference Finals. I don't want Mike Malone to channel his inner what's his name, Brandon Staley of the Chargers, who put out Mike Williams in a meaningless game and got hurt. That would seem pretty ridiculous. My thing is, my narrative that I'm crafting up is the Nuggets haven't played a game with Jokic in a while. They want him to be in somewhat game shape because they'll have another whole week off. So it seems like a good way to get a good scrimmage in. What the minutes look like, I don't think they get their full on rotations. Maybe it's 70% of what the rotations are ideally look like. Can they pop off against this team in limited minutes? They certainly can. It's nothing like it's stopping them. And unfortunately, the way things stand right now, it's a 3-game slate. So my only argument here, it's a 3-game slate. These guys grade out as great tournament options. Can Jokic put up 50 points and matter on this type of slate? he can. But unlikely that happens. I do think I'm more in line with you, where instead of getting high 30s minutes, it's more like high 20s minutes. Is kind of what the ceiling for me looks like for this Nuggets team, getting all these guys back.
And we did just recently get an ownership update, and there actually is some ownership going to the Denver guys. So I'll read it off here for DraftKings and for FanDuel. And the ownership is all going to the core guys. We don't have any of the bench players that are really picking up attention today. But starting with DraftKings, MPJ, Michael Porter Jr., currently projected for 12% ownership. Jamal Murray, 7% ownership. Jokic, 6%. And then Aaron Gordon at 3%. Nobody else is above 1% ownership on DraftKings. For FanDuel purposes, Jamal Murray is actually 11% owned. Aaron Gordon, 10%. Michael Porter Jr., 9%. Nikola Jokic, 9%. Here's the biggest issue I have with some of these Denver guys is if they're picking up no ownership, I think it'd be easier to say like, hey, you know what, I'll take a swing in large field tournaments, take a chance on them. But when these guys are, like 10-ish% owned, I kind of feel like the field is already there in terms of what I would potentially be willing to take a shot on. So I think with the ownership being there to some extent, I don't really want to take chances. If you had to take a chance on one Denver player, and if you want your answer to be none, that's okay as well. Who would be the one core guy from Denver that you would want to be playing in a tournament?
By core, you mean Gordon, Jokic, Murray, and Porter?
Gordon, Jokic, Murray, and Michael Porter Jr.
I will take some chances with. It's got to be Nikola Jokic, just because like if he were to play like 25 minutes, maybe he just wants to pad some stats. Maybe there's any contract incentive that I'm not aware of. I'll just take Jokic. I still think he would have the highest ceiling. I know it sucks up like so much salary, but I don't think I play Jokic in my one lineup but I think I get to one Jokic at least in my 10th lineup if I'm building by hand. That's how I would look at Jokic, and I think he just has the highest ceiling. So I'm still going to go with Jokic. The other guys, there's just other better plays at their position, right? The center position is kind of weak today. And I think we just got ruled Drew Eubanks is also out. So, yeah, the center position is going to be it's kind of weak. Jokic could be the highest scoring guy in 25 minutes by 25 points. So give me Nikola Jokic.
I agree with you. And here's my main reason for being in the same line of thinking as you when it comes to Nikola Jokic. There's a good amount of value on this slate and more of it coming. More players ruled out. More players could potentially be ruled out. I'll read the injury report off right now. And these are the players who are officially still listed as questionable on the injury report. We've got Karl-Anthony Towns questionable. Keldon Johnson is questionable. Romeo Langford is questionable. So, these are guys who, particularly for the Spurs, if both Romeo Langford and Keldon Johnson are out, we're going to see more cheap value come into play. We have to use our salary cap somewhere. This is a slate where, let's say, a bunch of cheapish guys go out and have pretty big fantasy games, which we're projecting to happen. There's a lot of cheap guys who are projecting pretty well. You just need points somewhere. And if a lot of these cheap guys go off, you could make a case that even 35, 40 fantasy points for Nikola Jokic could be in an optimal lineup when we have a slate that doesn't necessarily have a whole lot of safe pay-up options. And at some point, you just have to use that salary. So the raw points could matter. With that in mind, not a high priority play and not somebody that I'd even be overweight to the field to based on the current ownership projection. But if I absolutely had to take a shot on one guy, Nikola Jokic would be mine. So it looks like we're on the same page with that. As far as the role players go on Denver, are there any of those guys that you're still willing to take a shot on?
No, I think that's where things get. I don't need to get that cute on this type of slate. I know it's a short slate. There's high return on those type of players, but there's no Bruce Brown. Like who's going to really soak up those minutes? Is it going to be a Reggie Jackson? Like I really don't want to be going there. So none of these guys really stick out to me. I think we can take a chance on those teams, those lottery teams, Portland, San Antonio, Utah, in terms of taking chances on like the secondary role players, those G League players that are getting a lot of burn at this time in the season.
And we just got a question from this is Mincash Merchant in our Discord channel. One of the perks of being a Stokastic Plus Platinum member, you get into our Discord channel, get to ask us questions on shows and hang out with us in there. Mincash Merchant is asking, if you had the choice between 100% Jokic or none, where would you go? That would be none for me. If it had to be one or the other, I'd be much more apt to go with no Jokic than 100%. How about yourself, Ryan?
Repeat the 100% or none?
Yeah, so Mincash Merchant is saying if you had the choice in your lineups to play 0% Jokic or 100%, which side of that would you be on?
Probably 0%. Yeah. Unless I'm trying to find quotes from Mike Malone. Mike Malone only has quoted saying Jokic will be available. I'm trying to see if there's any like minutes connotation behind that quote, just to see what's available for Mike Malone to say. But because I'll take something based on what Malone's going to say there with Jokic's minutes today.
And also, I'm assuming that they start the regular starters. Is that your assumption as well? Jamal Murray, Kentavious Caldwell-Pope, Michael Porter Jr., Aaron Gordon, Nikola Jokic. I don't think these guys play the entire game. Like I said before, I think it's more they play a half, kind of like what you called it before, a preseason type game. That's what I'm expecting from them. But do you think they roll out the regular starting lineup to get reps before the playoffs?
I think so. Yeah, I'm trying to find all things Denver beat reporters right now, and no real traction on what Jokic's minutes look like. If you do go 100% Jokic, you'll certainly, I think, be well above the field. And he could, if he finds a way to play 30 plus minutes, you're going to be sitting real pretty.
Yeah, it's an interesting question, Min Cash Merchant. But like I said, I'm going to be on the 0% side. Is there anything else you want to add from the Denver side of the game, Ryan? Like I said, I think this is the least appealing team to target on the slate.
Yeah. Well, based on what Mike Singer said, their Denver beat reporters, they said starters are available, I'm told. So proceed with caution. I'm trying to see what else is out there. Mike Malone said he expects the starters to be available. Emphasized he wants to get the minutes on the court together. Also said he doesn't expect Bruce Brown to play. I don't expect starters to play full game together, though. Probably only a couple quarters. So based on the Mike Singer 38 minutes ago beat reporter there, I am more inclined to go 0% Jokic and a lot less Denver Nuggets just based on that report. I can share this to producer Jacob if he wants to throw that up on the screen. So
sure, and throw it into YouTube chat as well, so the people could check that out if they want to click on it and see the source, or if somebody wants to follow Mike Singer and add him to their Twitter feed so that they get more of that Nuggets information. We'll have that available. Let's move on to the Utah side of the game. And unlike the Denver side, the Utah side, massively important and a team that I love getting exposure to. The current injury report for the Utah Jazz. Rudy Gay is out. Walker Kessler is out. Taylor Horton-Tucker is out. Kelly Olynyk is out. Laurie Markin is out. Colin Sexton is out. Jordan Clarkson is out. It took a minute for the Utah Jazz to get here, but lo and behold, they are now tanking, trying to maybe improve their draft situation a little bit before the season ends. And as a result, this is a team that's picking up all kinds of ownership. So let me refresh our ownership page to make sure I'm looking at the most recent numbers, because last I looked, this is a team, and we did get an ownership update from 3 minutes ago. So Ryan, if you want to refresh the ownership page on your own end, if anybody's watching and looking at our ownership projections, refresh that. We just got a fresh run a few minutes ago. And why this is important when it comes to the Utah Jazz, the three most popular players on the slate for DraftKings: Kris Dunn, 87% projected ownership; Lucas Samanic, 75% projected ownership; Johnny Juzang, 54% projected ownership. Talking about these guys from a FanDuel perspective, Kris Dunn, 93% owned. That has to be the highest ownership projection we've seen on anybody for a main slate the entire year. No, 93%.
Yeah, that's insane. That's pretty much like, are you going to lock him in or are you going to go 0%? Going back to Min Cash's Discord question. What are you going to do with Kris Dunn is kind of like the narrative of the slate, it seems like.
And then the other players on Utah, Lucas Samanic on FanDuel projected for 63% ownership. And then the next most popular player is Agbaji for Utah, currently projecting for 38% on FanDuel, $5,100. But let's start by talking about Kris Dunn, because this is an insane amount of ownership, Ryan. 87% on DraftKings to reiterate, 93% on FanDuel. When I run lineups just uninhibited in Fantasy Cruncher, even with randomness jacked up, I get to like 98% Kris Dunn. So relative to all the ownership going to Dunn, do you think it's warranted that he's this popular?
Yeah, it's a 3-game slate. Yeah, there's a lot of warrant there. I say that with a lot of caution, just because that's a lot of ownership, and like you get that one case if he just finds a way to fail, and you see a guy like Mike Conley. There's how many? If you were to play this slate 100 times, Mike Conley in the similar price range, as gross as it sounds, how many times does he outscore Kris Dunn?
Yeah,
I think he finds a way to maybe outscore him at least 10, 15 times, but it's tough to advocate a fade at Kris Dunn here at that type of ownership, just because if he finds a way to high 30, mid 30s minutes, he's going to find a way to pay off. But there's a big reward return if you just fade this guy and you're just willing to take that risk on. If Kris Dunn fails, you're going to be jumping straight to the top pretty much if you just have solid guys across the board in your lineup. Well, a lot of Kris Dunn roster construction looks very similar, it seems like.
And then the other part of this I'm curious to ask you is, and Kris Dunn, by the way, if you guys are playing the biggest no-brainer of the season, you're playing Kris Dunn in cash games today, and even in tournaments, it would be super risky to fade him. I didn't get 100% of him in the crunch that I ran, but he came up in nearly everything. What has to happen for Kris Dunn to fail, though? Like, is there somebody on Utah that you would view as a leverage option where it's like, hey, maybe this guy plays ahead of Kris Dunn and is being overlooked by the field in some way that we should be rostering in place of Kris Dunn in any lineups?
If Kris Dunn were to fail, my guess is like he doesn't rack up enough usage, and you see a guy like Simone Fontecchio and get hot from the outside. Baji gets hot from the outside. Juzang can create his own shot. So it'd be one of those three guys who are getting some ownership as well. Lucas Samanic has also shown the ability to put up big fantasy production. I'm skeptical about the front court today. They did sign Vernon Carey Jr., and I think he's going to play today. So there's a chance that he might steal some minutes from Udoka Azubuike. So skeptical about the front court just because of a new body there in Vernon Carey. But if Dunn's going to fail, I certainly like one of those other potential guys to get a little bit more usage.
Have you ever noticed this? You get to the end of the NBA season. I've noticed this as we do shows. The guys that we don't talk about all year, they never have easy names to pronounce. Like there's nobody who it's hey, look, some guy is starting for the Utah Jazz today. His name is like Tim Johnson. It's never that. It's Lucas Samanic, it's Udoka Azubuike, it's Fontecchio. Like they always try to trip you up. They try to make sure you've been paying attention all year. This is how the NBA weeds out the real content creators from the people who don't know what's going on. It's, can you reasonably pronounce some of these players' names? And I think so far, 2 gold stars for us. We're doing a good job on that standpoint so far. So Kris Dunn is the player who is picking up the most ownership. He is the guy also who, if I was building 150 lineups, which I'm not for this slate because I'm a somewhat sane person. I don't want to actually go out and play 150 lineups for this 3-game slate. If I was, though, I would still be getting Kris Dunn right around the field, even with all the ownership that he's getting. Who is the next Utah Jazz player that you would be targeting the heaviest in lineups, Ryan?
Next Utah Jazz player, I think it might be Samanic. I might take some chances on him. I think he'd be the guy who I feel comfortable with. We also did get news the Spurs guys are out. I think Keldon Johnson and Collins are out. So that'll open up some things where Utah pivots are certainly in play. I think I'm going to just take out. It would be Samanic for me. I think he can certainly be the highest fantasy scoring Utah Jazz player for this Utah team. So I think Samanic would be my go.
Yep. So in the lineups that I have run here, and it's the same for DraftKings and FanDuel. Of the Utah players, I got the most exposure to Kris Dunn. The second most exposure I got to was Samanic. That's for both DraftKings and FanDuel. For DraftKings, I got to Juzang, the third most. And for FanDuel, I ended up getting to Agbaji, the third most. So one other thing I want to ask you about before we talk about any more on Utah. This is only 3-game slate. Utah is the team that I consider the best as a points per dollar team of anybody on the slate. What is the most amount of players from the Jazz that you'd be willing to play in one lineup? Would you be setting any rules in Fantasy Cruncher to limit how many Utah players you're getting to?
No, not on this 3-game slate. I think there are multiple ways. At least 4 can find a way of paying off. It also depends on how much salary you're allocating to those 4 guys. Are you going to be allocating $15,000 or $18,000? So there's so many factors when it comes to something like that. Now you can certainly make rules where if you don't want to play 2 guys together, that's completely fine. If you don't, I wouldn't recommend playing Azubuike and Carey Jr. in the same lineup. I feel like that's very counterintuitive on this slate. So I think that's something you need to take some chances on. Damian Jones also, I wouldn't play any of those 2. I wouldn't play any of those 2 of those 3 guys in the same lineup. So instead of limiting Jazz players, I think I would more or less set rules for this Jazz team. I just think it's a crowded front court today where I think there's a lot of front court by the center position. So I think there are a lot of ways all 3 of those guys can just fail. And it could be a 16-16 split come the end of the game, and they're all just don't pay off their salary.
Yeah, no, that's definitely something that's live to happen here. And then So we don't have Vernon Carey as an option. He's not in the player pool on DraftKings or FanDuel, but we've got so much ownership going to this Jazz team. Is there anybody towards the end of the bench that's maybe a little bit less popular that stands out to you for tournament purposes? And once again, if it's nobody, that's a totally acceptable answer. But whether it is somebody like, a Juan Toscano-Anderson who is projected for more modest ownership, is there anybody you're willing to take shots on for the bench guys on Utah?
Hell no, never with Juan Toscano Anderson. That's your boy. I know you love the roster, Juan.
Oh my God.
But no, never Wanty. That's just, only time it's appropriate to take some chances on Juan Toscano Anderson, if then, it's the showdown slate. And I say that with hesitancy as well. Great story for Juan Toscano Anderson, but honestly, he shouldn't be in the league.
Yeah, so for people who aren't aware, probably the hardest I've ever been trolled for anything in the time I've been doing DFS content is there was a slate where Juan Toscano-Anderson, it was a slate with no value and a lot of pay-up options. I'm going to add that as a caveat, right? So I'm going to give myself some sort of buffer here so I don't look like the biggest donkey on the planet. But Juan Toscano-Anderson on a slate with very little value gets put into the Warriors starting lineup with like 6 minutes to go until that game locks. I decide I'm going to play all of the Juan Toscano-Anderson. I think I play like 96% of Juan Toscano-Anderson that day. He gets into foul trouble 3 minutes into the game or something like that, checks out and never comes back in. He scored negative fantasy points for the game. And people finally stopped trolling me about it after about a couple of months, but I figure I'd bring it back up so we could bring that back to light. Yeah, probably the worst side I've ever been on in my entire DFS career was the day I went heavy on Juan Toscano-Anderson. He scored negative fantasy points. So I tend to agree with you, Ryan. Not a guy who belongs in the NBA and is somebody who's on my shit list. Jimmy Butler's still number one, but Juan Toscano-Anderson is around there as well.
Should we make a bet with Juan Toscano-Anderson? So let's say if Juan Toscano-Anderson is in the winning lineup today, you have to buy a Juan Toscano jersey and wear it on our next show together.
Sure. I don't really know how the bet works because I don't know how I win. But yeah, we can do that. The other thing too, does anybody?
You just have to buy. If we hate him so much that you just have to rep his jersey. The highlighter yellow Utah Jazz Juan Toscano jersey. It's $55.99. That's pretty cheap for a jersey.
Yeah, I was going to ask is do they even make Juan Toscano-Anderson jerseys? Because who's buying them? Who's looking for them?
Mrs. Juan Toscano-Anderson.
Yes, I was going to say it's not like this is a popular last name where there's a lot of people rocking Toscano-Anderson jerseys. So I don't know. Maybe it's a thing where it's like, hey, we produced 12, 10 of them are still in stock, and that's what's up on the website right now. So yeah, let's do it. We'll call it a bet.
All right, sounds good.
No way for us to win, but there's certainly a way to lose.
Yeah, repping Juan Toscano-Anderson. Here we go. I think Johnny Juzang would have the highest upside among those guys, in my opinion. So he'd be the guy who I'm looking to. Juzang is the type of guy who can generally create his own shot. Those are the type of players who I tend to take some chances on coming off the bench. Not a guy like Juan Toscano-Anderson. So Juzang would be the guy for the Jazz player that I'm willing to take some more chances than maybe the field would.
Greg Art, great name, by the way. Greg, you can't get a Juan Toscano-Anderson jersey before a Magruder jersey. You can't wear a jersey of your ex, though, right? You can't, because, him and I, we had our fling. It was short-lived, but, we moved past it, right? That would be weird. Imagine if you saw, somebody, Juan Toscano-Anderson, his ex-wife, because I assume nobody saved him. I'm sure he's been divorced many times. I imagine his ex-wife is not wearing his jersey around on streets into games. So I'm not going to be getting a Rodney Magruder jersey. Probably not anytime soon. Anything else you want to talk about from the Utah Jazz, Ryan?
No, I think they're a great tournament team. It's going to be centered around Kris Dunn. So I think if I'm going to be building one lineup on DraftKings today, I'm going to take some chances and just fading him. That's just playing one lineup, $20 over there. I think I would take some chances and fade him. But keep in mind, that's just a high risk, high reward. Yeah. With that type of ownership on this type of slate at this moment in the season, I think it's okay to come in a little bit under the field. I don't necessarily think you need to lock them in. I think there's some other options that have certainly opened up where you can change up your roster construction without Kris Dunn.
Yeah, and there's certainly angles where that it's not exactly the same, but yesterday when I was doing Live Before Lock with Neil, and we were talking about how I didn't think that Luka Doncic was going to play very much yesterday. Now, immediately, I'm seeing people in chat. They're calling me a moron, an idiot, which is generally justified. There's a lot of things I'll say where I think that is a valid And it is a certainly warranted response to things that I'll say or takes I'll have, especially when you're trying to make strong takes for tournaments where, it's oftentimes low probability stuff with high upside. And I ultimately would have been on the right side of that. Unfortunately, everybody ended up finding out that Luka was only playing limited minutes before the game started. But I don't really view what you're saying right there about Kris Dunn any different. It's something that relative to the ownership, because yesterday we did have Luka at the time as projected to be the most rostered player on the slate. You could also make lineups without Kris Dunn and really differentiate yourself from the field tonight. But let's talk about the next game, the Portland Trailblazers against the Los Angeles Clippers. And this injury report for the Blazers, it's something else, Ryan. Anthony Simons is out. Damian Lillard's out. Drew Eubanks is now out. Yusuf Nurkic is out. Justice Winslow is out. Ibu Baji is out. Keon Johnson is out. Jeremy Grant is out. Nasir Little is out. Matisse Thybulle is out. Cam Reddish is out. That is 11 players who are out for Portland, and they have 9 players active. So this is a team that they're kind of limited in their options now that we have Drew Eubanks officially out for today. So is there any player that's standing out above all of the others as far as a value option goes from the Blazers?
The Blazers playing a Clippers team that's going to be pretty much rolled out to just win. So, yeah, in terms of guys who just have simply the upside of being well worth it, Trendon Watford is playing today. I don't know what those minutes will look like coming off of an injury. So I'm trying to see if there's any notes of he's going to start. So he's coming off an ankle injury. If Watford's good to go, I like taking some chances on Trendon Watford. Hopefully that'll work out for Watford, but you can definitely sprinkle these starters in. I know it's a Clippers spot, but I think it's well worth getting above the field on a couple of these Blazers guys because I think the starters might get a little bit more burn than one might expect. I'm really interested to see what the Watford ownership will come in at, but keep in mind he's coming off an ankle injury, so the minutes just might be organically limited.
Yeah, I'm refreshing the ownership right now. By the way, we got the Denver Nuggets starting lineup, and it's what we anticipated. Jamal Murray, Kentavious Caldwell-Pope, Michael Porter Jr., Aaron Gordon, Nikola Jokic. So we got the normal starting 5. As for the current ownership for Watford, we've got Watford projected for 11% ownership on DraftKings. On FanDuel, he is projected for 21% ownership. He's actually fairly popular on FanDuel Watford, not quite as much on DraftKings. I know you said you wanted to see what his ownership is. At that kind of number, just assuming that 30 minutes from now, we don't have any clear, concrete information what his minutes are going to be, is somebody be willing to take shots on at 21% on FanDuel or 11% on DraftKings?
Yeah, I think he has to be good to go. Otherwise, with like 2 games left, I think Watford was playing well enough that he could easily take Drew Eubanks' spot next year in the rotation. So I think he has to be good to go. And I'm going to ride with Trendon Watford, hoping that he finds a way to low 30s minutes would be awesome. But even anyway, from high to low 30s minutes, I think Watford can put up a number that matters. So that's the type of player who I'm willing to take some chances on. Watford has shown the ability to have big upside games where you have power forward center eligibility at 6,600. I don't think he'll get much ownership on DraftKings at all. So he's the type of guy I'm willing to take some chances on.
Yeah, no, I think that definitely makes, and he's, like you said, not a bad fantasy producer. And then also consider all the guys who are out for Portland. The one thing I really struggle with personally at this point of the season is there are a lot of guys who are bad pointsmen and fantasy producers for the full length of the season that all of a sudden get thrust into big minutes. And it's kind of hard to project them just because, like, all right, well, this guy's been garbage from a fantasy perspective all year, but it's hard to weigh that against all the players that'll be out for some of these teams. Watford's actually been a serviceable fantasy producer, and the minutes are up in the air considering that he's coming off that ankle injury, but for sure, there's a possibility of him getting the extended minutes. And relative to this being a 3-game slate, especially on DraftKings, the ownership is pretty low. Is there anybody else that stands out to you from the Blazers for this slate?
Yeah, I mean, we know Shaedon Sharpe just has the ability to shoot the ball 25, 30 times a game with all of these guys out. A lot less ball handling duty with the insertion of Skylar Mays over the last week. So that's something to keep in mind of. But Shaedon Sharpe, I just think this kid has so much talent. If he plays a year at Kentucky, I think he might be a top 3 pick. I think that's how talented he was. He just sat the year out there. And Sharpe just has the ability to put up just raw offensive numbers, buckets and buckets. He's super athletic. So he's the type of guy. I know he doesn't grade out as a great point per dollar play at all, but he just has the upside. And a 3-game slate, those are the type of players I want to target.
Yeah. And the other thing, too, with Portland Trailblazers is looking at some of the players on the team, they only got 9 active guys. So they have to be giving some of these guys big minutes. Like you said, some of the minutes for the starters could be greater than anticipated. That'll happen when there's only 9 active players for the entire team. Are there any other bench guys that you're looking to potentially take a shot on in tournaments? And once again, if it's nobody, it's an acceptable answer.
Off the bench, it's a little difficult, right? We've seen the name of the week, Jonathan Williams, being part of this rotation. So Shaq Harrison has the ability to rack up steals in a hurry on FanDuel, but that seems a little too thin of a play. He's 5,200 over there, so you're going to need quite a bit of steals there. But no one really sticks out to me in terms of guys off the bench. But I like taking the chances on the starters. I think Jonathan Williams, you want to play him at 4,900 on FanDuel, completely fine. Trendon Watford coming in there is just going to take away a lot of usage from some of these guys, I think, whenever he's on the court. So it's Watford for me, Sharp, and then maybe some Jonathan Williams. But I like Watford and Sharp in my tier of Blazers players by quite a bit. And then it's kind of like everyone else. No one really I'm excited to go to. Skylar Mays is fine. I think he makes for a 5,900 price tag on FanDuel completely fine to go to. Nothing too exciting. I think he just grades out as a good value at $5,900. Nothing really else excites me about him.
We've got a question here from Moses Guthrie. He wants to know, do we have reason to think that Minnesota starters could be facing the same reduced minutes as Denver starters? I would be surprised if that's the case. Not that Minnesota has to go out and play their starters 40 minutes, but this game has actual meaning for Minnesota, whereas it doesn't for Denver. So it's a game against the Spurs. There's certainly some blowout risk, but I feel much better about Minnesota starters minutes than Denver. Is that how you feel also, Ryan?
Oh, yeah. I mean, remember last year's home playoff game in Minnesota? Like, you best believe they want that home court advantage for that play-in game. Unfortunately, no Pat Bev will be jumping up and down and dancing on the scores table, but Minnesota, I'm pretty sure they want to make sure they get that home court game. There's so they're 40-40. They're playing today and playing tomorrow. Is there a way they can be the 8th seed by any chance?
Let's see. So we've got the Timberwolves are currently a game and a half behind the Pelicans. So let's see who has the tiebreaker between them. Timberwolves versus Pelicans games this season. So I'm fairly sure they can be, but maybe I'm wrong on this. So games this year between them.
So I do want to clarify. Shout out to Matt Butler, who sent me a message saying Wofford did start last game. He only played 19 minutes and 44 seconds and didn't return from the midpoint of the third quarter there. So and that makes a lot of sense. A valid reason not to go to Watford. But now with no Drew Eubanks in the picture, I just think those minutes seem a little bit more safe. Sure, there's a guy in Jabari Walker and John Butler Jr. who can take up some minutes in the front court. So, and yeah, that's a valid reason not to go to Watford. I just feel like those minutes feel like a little bit more safe with no Eubanks. Do you feel a certain way about Watford after that message from Matt Butler?
I mean, ish, but
yeah.
So he played limited minutes last game, but it doesn't mean he has to play the same minutes this game, and they could ramp him up as well. To me, it's still he could play 20 again today. He could play 25. Like, I think he still has the upside to play mid to high 20s minutes, which could be enough on a 3-game slate to be in a winning lineup. So I still think that everything we said before still holds true. High variance spot. The minutes are not very easy to predict. But whose minutes are easy to predict today? So he wouldn't be my favorite play on the slate by any means, but I still think he's viable.
Yeah, no, I think that's a great way to break that one down.
So looking at the other side of this game, the Los Angeles Clippers against the Portland Trailblazers, what do you make of some of the payoff options? We've got Kawhi Leonard, we've got Russell Westbrook as decent enough fantasy producers. Paul George remains out. Marcus Morris is out today. If you're rostering anybody on the high end, how high of a priority would Kawhi be amongst the other players we have to spend up for?
Yeah, if you're just going stars and scrubs build, Kawhi Leonard, certainly if you were to play the slate 100 times, how often is he the highest scoring player on this slate? Him and Anthony Edwards, obviously Kawhi's going to project a little bit more. Just out of projections matter there, but I like going to Kawhi Leonard. He makes for a great option based on our boom bust percentage. Our optimal rate seems pretty significant for a guy at that salary. So I think Kawhi Leonard makes a ton of sense today. I like going to him in a lot of chances, like 19.8% optimal at 10-4 price tag on DK. So Kawhi is someone that I think is well worth going to, at least in that amount of lineups. I think he makes for a ton of sense. I like going to Leonard. I think there's enough value to get him in there today.
Yeah, especially because this is still a game that holds some significance. So looking at where the Clippers are in the standings. So it's still, like I said, it's the really weird situation with how aggressively do they want to avoid potentially playing the Phoenix Suns. Because if we look at if the Clippers win their final two games, they are going to be locked into the 5 seed, right? They would end up being ahead of the Warriors in the stands, which would mean that they do end up having to play the Suns in the first round. And the other thing too is if the Clippers end up being the 5 seed, if there's any time they don't want to play the Suns, they might not have Paul George to open the playoffs. That would put them at an even greater disadvantage. But then also we could see the Clippers get to 6th, and they could potentially also be 7th. They can't be lower than 7th, though, as I'm looking at some of the seeding here. So ideally for the Clippers, I think they want to be in that 6 seed, but it's really hard to control all these other variables. So maybe they just go out there and just try to win, which is what I think is going to happen, considering that they're playing their guys and back-to-back and all of that. So Kawhi Leonard, Russell Westbrook, I think both of them are good pay-up options. Are there any role players that you like to get to from the Clippers?
Role players. From the Clippers side of things, I mean, just looking back at the Kawhi optimal percentage on FanDuel, our Boom Bust is indicating a whopping 45%. Obviously, positionality and a great price tag. I mean, Kawhi looks like an awesome play. But in terms of role players, Greg, it's interesting in terms of the Clippers aspect. I mean, we know Russ can put up a huge number. It's a cake Portland team. Russ has probably the second highest ceiling on the team outside of Leonard. And it could be the Russ show today. I mean, Russ wants to eat. He certainly should be able to do so against the backcourt of Shaedon Sharpe and Skylar Mays. I think Russ should find a way to be himself if that's what he wants to do. I think Russ would be the second guy I go to just purely on upside. But we've seen Norman Powell play more minutes, and they want Norman Powell to be fully healthy and conditioned just to get that offensive firepower with Paul George missing. So he's another guy here. It's a Portland team. I expect this Clippers team to take care of business. So I think Norm Powell would be the third guy. So it goes Kawhi, Russ, then Norm Powell for me, just in terms of just targeting guys with serious upside.
And we just got the starting lineup for the Jazz. It is Dunn, Agbaji, Samanic, Juan Toscano Anderson, and Igo Gazubuki. Oh boy, have the stakes been upped here.
Yeah.
He's starting.
Are you nervous? Are you nervous to walk the streets with a Juan T jersey?
Does this mean that people should be playing him in DFS now, Ryan? I think it does.
Oh my God. I can't. I'm gonna walk off this show. I'm really curious. The Boom Bust is gonna update with Juan Toscano Anderson. He's gonna have some sort of optimal percentage that is gonna be very intriguing to go to. Man, we just crafted a narrative into play. I think Will Hardy is watching our show. 4,100 for Juan Toscano Anderson. Would you rather play 4,100 Juan Toscano Anderson or Luka Samanic?
Relative to ownership, Juan Toscano Anderson. Relative to projection, Luka Samanic.
Yeah, I think the projections matter. I think it's a distinct projection difference. Let's see what the Juan Toscano ownership minutes projection all look like. We should get that relatively soon. So pretty important news. I know we've touched on a couple of Jazz, but yeah. But I'm still very skeptical to go into Juan Toscano Anderson. Like, his ownership projection is going to be around 30-40%. I'm a step aside. That's all you guys. I can't.
Do you watch Game of Thrones, Ryan?
No, I don't.
Okay. I was going to say, because if Juan Toscano Anderson has a big game today, Ryan's going to be, it's going to look like the meme that's really popular from Game of Thrones where Tommen jumps out the window. It's just going to be Ryan walking off the back and jumping out one of the windows that are right behind him, overlooking Chicago. So that's, if you've ever seen the GIF from Game of Thrones where somebody jumping out the window, that's Tommen towards the tail end of the show. But we talked about the Clippers here, and let's move on to the Minnesota Timberwolves. I was going to talk about some bets, but we're actually doing pretty well on time here, and this is a super hard slate to bet. But if you guys do want to check out all the tools we have over at Stokastic.com for a betting perspective. We've got NBA Bet Pro. In addition to that, MLB Bet Pro. So one subscription and it handles MLB bets and NBA. So we know NBA season is ending, but it's still going to cover playoffs and all the bets there, going to cover the play-in tournament. And we've got baseball. And baseball doesn't quit for anything. There's a million games every single day. Lots of bets that pop out well. So go check out Bet Pro. And then also, if you use the link that we have below, 7-day free trial to get access to all of that. It's going to cover the next upcoming baseball slates and the play-in tournament for basketball as well. Final game on the slate, Ryan, Minnesota Timberwolves, San Antonio Spurs. This is one of the spots that makes this a really tricky slate. We're locking shortly. Karl-Anthony Towns is questionable. Jalen Noel is questionable. Do you expect Cat to play?
Yes, I do. I think it's just important for them to just have, if they're the 9 seed, getting that at home court. I think it's really important. I do expect Cat to play, but they are playing the measly Spurs. So yeah, I think Cat certainly. I think Cat should play. We'll probably get that news very soon, within the next 15 to 20 minutes or so.
And we've got some super chats. First from the Thunder wants to know my favorite options for tiers. So I have some tiers lineups built here. So the Thunder, to answer your question, my favorite player in tier 1 is Kawhi Leonard. Tier 2, Karl-Anthony Towns. If Cat doesn't end up playing, just swap him to Anthony Edwards. Super easy 1-for-1 swap, especially because they're playing in the same exact game or same time, same game, same team. Tier 3, Shaedon Sharpe. Tier 4, Skylar Mays is the one I like the best. Tier 5, Kris Dunn. That's a super easy one. And then tier 6, that's where things get a little bit tight. There's a lot of options there, but I like Agbaji, the best in tier 6 of all the tiers options. So the Thunder, I hope that helps you out. And then Melissa Harvey has left us a super chat. She says, trying to get the perfect tiers lineups for achievements, would you go 100% done for tier 5? And thanks. So I ran 150 tiers lineups and Kris Dunn came up in 148 of them in tier 5.
Who else was in his tier?
Yeah, so the other options that we have in tier 5 are it's Kris Dunn, Trey Jones, and Mike Conley and Keta Bates-Job. Oh, and Trendon Watford as well.
Gotcha. Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, I mean, Dunn just grades out as a great play. I mean, it's just so difficult as I try to manufacture this one lineup on hand. It is Dunn just makes everything fit. But I think one easy way just to like build a lineup with Dunn and then swap Dunn for Trey Jones and you just pray. That's one way to just get different, right?
Yeah. So if I had to play one player who was not Kris Dunn in tier 5, I would say Mike Conley. But it's tricky because tiers, is just kind of, we're just looking at who projects the best. And, we do have Kris Dunn project for 16 more fantasy points than Mike Conley. So it's hard to not say Kris Dunn in tier 5. He's the guy I would be going with there. But getting back to the Minnesota Timberwolves, so we're assuming Karl-Anthony Towns plays. I'm on the same page as you. I think Cat is going to be out there as well. If you had to pay up for one guy on Minnesota between Cat, Anthony Edwards, Rudy Gobert, who would you be choosing?
Anthony Edwards. I think Anthony Edwards, just in terms of just shot volume alone, I'm going to go with Anthony Edwards. I think Cat, obviously, and it's been now 2 weeks that he's been back from injury. The highest minutes he has played in a game, I believe, is 36. So, that not to say there's an imaginary minutes cap. You need Cat to be really effective from the field. He's been pretty outstanding from 3 this season, I think, for a big man. So I think 8,300 Cat certainly has the upside. And I've noticed she's playing both, but if I were to pick one, it's Anthony Edwards.
Yeah, Edwards is the one I got the most exposure to. Cat's going to be interesting from a tournament perspective because I don't think people are going to click his name. The slate locks in 10 minutes and Towns is still officially questionable, considering that there's only one game or there's only going to be one game locked and then just 2 games on after. Like, I don't know how many people are going to be reserving roster spots for Cat. So I think he's going to be a little bit under-owned in tournaments. So I like getting to Cat. I think Edwards makes a whole lot of sense. I like Conley in the mid-range. Before we were talking about tiers options, and it's hard to say that Mike Conley is just going to, 1-for-1 outscore Kris Dunn from a fantasy perspective. Yeah. But, at least in classic contests, we could play both of them. Mike Conley's a mid-range point guard play I like quite a bit. Is he somebody you like getting to?
Yeah, just solely because in terms of just like getting off the Kris Dunn ownership, I'm all about that, right? I think there's a pathway of just high success there. Keep in mind, don't expect Conley to be the guy taking the most shots on the Minnesota team. Don't expect him to be putting up double-digit shot attempts consistently, but you're hoping for Conley to find a way to get that double-double, get some steals, rebounds, kind of fill up the stat sheet like he did against the Lakers. but a couple games ago where he was just outstanding across the board. So very efficiently shooting. But keep in mind, if Dunn just erupts, you pretty much, I think we're all cooked if we just fade Kris Dunn. As I more and more build this lineup out, man, Kris Dunn looks really good. Got to kind of walk back my one lineup fade a little bit. We'll see how this ends up in the next 9 minutes.
Is there anybody else you like from Minnesota? Because it's a team where I really like the pay up options. I think that they're relatively safe when we're talking about the context of this slate. But because we have Rudy Gobert, Anthony Edwards, Karl Anthony Towns, and we're expecting Cat to play, there just doesn't leave a lot of usage for other guys like Jaden McDaniels or Kyle Anderson. So is there anybody that you like of the role players from Minnesota?
No, I think I'm just like, I'll take like those mid-range players from the other teams we touched on. No real role players. You're really hoping for fluky games from McDaniels, Prince. I know slow-mo certainly in terms of minutes can be very effective, but that's kind of slowed down with the return of Karl Anthony Towns. So that's something I'm hesitant to go to. He had some monster games there for a stretch, but I think he's came down to earth a little bit.
We just got word that Romeo Langford is going to be available to play, which is going to be relevant because we're about to talk about the other side of this game, which features the San Antonio Spurs. Also, we did get a question from Mincash Merchant. He wants to know, what about fading Samanic over Dunn? Feels easier to make a line that you feel good about. If you had to fade Samanic instead of Dunn, is that something that you'd feel better about?
Yeah, I think that's completely fine. I think both are going to be two of the highest owned players on the slate, and that's another way to just get different. Like, I think a lot of Dunn lineups will have Samanic lineups on the slate in the contest, so that's certainly one way to get different. Like, we look at individual ownership, lineup ownership, but sometimes like seeing like what like pairing ownerships are very common. That's definitely one way to get different. I think the Dunn Samanic pairing is going to be quite a bit owned, right? I think when it come in at maybe 30% of Dunn's lineups will have Samanic. So I think that's how we got to look at it.
What a time of the year we've gotten to where people say, is Luka Samanic fadeable? Like Luka Samanic
he's a beast though.
Yeah, like, how many people even knew he existed 4 days ago, and now he's unfadeable. That's what ends up happening in the last couple of days of the NBA regular season. But let's wrap up the final team this late to talk about, and that is the San Antonio Spurs. The most recent injury news we got from them: Romeo Langford is going to be in. Players that are out: Jeremy Sochan, Keldon Johnson, Doug McDermott, Charles Bassey, Devontae Graham, Zach Collins, Devin Vassell, Kem Birch. They are all going to be out today. So not that many players that are available for the San Antonio Spurs. Are there, just starting some of the low-owned plays, is there anything off the bench that stands out to you from the Spurs as being like, this could be a spot to differentiate now that we do have guys like Zach Collins and Keldon Johnson out?
Off the bench for the Spurs team? That's difficult. With Romeo Langford being there, just having another body kind of muddies the situation, right? Makes things a little difficult. Like, the most confident starters that I'm looking to go to are Jones and Mamukelashvili. If I had to play one bench player, it would be Dominic Barlow. But that's really about it. I like that price tag for him on DraftKings.
Okay. No, I mean, totally reasonable. Dominic Barlow, pulling up his points per minute rates. We've got Dominic Barlow over the last week, so last 3 games, we're actually seeing him play extended minutes. Small sample size, but 22 minutes per game, 21.5 fantasy points. So he's been pretty serviceable from that standpoint. If we look at the other players from the Spurs, is there anybody you currently consider safe or an option you really like to get to that you feel has some security from San Antonio?
Safe. Maybe Trey Jones, but yeah, I think Trey Jones. If they're rolling him out, I think he seems pretty safe.
Yeah, so if we look at the current ownership right now, and I'll give one final refresh to this with about 6 minutes to go. And also, if you guys have any questions and you're in our Discord channel, at me, so we could get to those before we wrap up here. The current most rostered player on the Spurs, it's Trey Jones by a pretty wide margin. DraftKings. Trey Jones projected for 53.3% ownership. And then over on FanDuel, he's projected for 46% ownership at 7,300. If you're building out more than one lineup, if you're building out a handful of lineups, do you think you would be over, underweight, or even to the field on Trey Jones at right around 50% ownership?
I think it's probably an even play for me. No real one way or the other. I think maybe a little bit higher, and naturally I think Dunn's ownership will come down based on that, but maybe a little bit higher just to get a little bit Kris Dunn, just because of Dunn's ridiculously high ownership projection right now. And I think there's certainly a pathway he fails. So I'm really looking at a way to just jump the field real quickly. So.
And then is there anything else you want to talk about from the San Antonio Spurs? Any players that are standing out beyond Trey Jones or maybe Dominic Barlow to take shots on?
Yeah. Mamu Kelishvili. Let's ride. I really like Mamu Kelishvili on this slate. Center spot. I mean, if you look at the centers right now on the slate that are remotely playable, I mean, have you seen what options we have? It's so gross. So Mamu Kelishvili, I think, is just going to be a solid center option just to go to and take some chances on. So sign me up for some Mamu.
Yeah, and if we look at Sandro right now, he is no surprise. He's picked up ownership since the more recent news we've gotten from the Spurs and the players who are out. But Mamu Kelishvili projected for 37% ownership on FanDuel, and DraftKings is now up to 28%. This is about as expensive as we've seen him, but he's going to be a pretty decent fantasy producer when he gets those minutes. So I have no issue getting to him at all there. And any other final thoughts on the Spurs? If not, we could take your guys' questions. We could have some closing thoughts on the slate, and then that'll do it for my NBA regular season coverage. So anything else you want to talk about from the Spurs or the slate in general, Ryan?
No, keep an eye on any fluky starting lineups or news that might come out of nowhere. But with Romeo Langford coming in, if he were to start, you can take some chances on him. But it's been a wild last couple of days, and expect it to continue to be wild. If you guys play Summer League DFS, this is a bunch of Summer League players that just are popping off right now. So it's been really interesting to see which guys are doing it. Shout out to Steve Buzzard, who had Lindell Wigginton take him to the top. One saw him in the Detroit airport. So he was just hooping around.
So important information for people, especially this time of year. We've got somebody had said that, where was it? Somebody had said that DraftKings had somebody wrong in the starting lineup. I want to make sure that I'm giving whoever was asked the question. The reason that DraftKings has the wrong starting lineup for the Jazz is because the information, if you're getting from DraftKings, don't get your information from DraftKings. If you're just looking at the app, you're not going to be getting the best information from the starting lineups there. They end up being wrong once every couple of days or so. So I wouldn't put too much stock into that at all. But another very important question here from Stephen Leibowitz, Ryan. What bet can we make to have Ryan wear a Mamu shirt? So if I'm wearing Juan Toscano Anderson, what has to happen for you to wear a Mamu Kelishvili shirt?
I mean, I love Mamu Kelishvili. I mean, I'm all about that Mamu life. 50 piece?
50 piece?
50 fantasy points.
All right.
That's like 20 fantasy points for Juan Toscano Anderson. Let's be real.
Yeah, it went adjusted for inflation.
Yeah.
Adjusted for JTA inflation. So going to double check Discord, make sure we didn't have any questions there, which we don't. And we don't have anything else in YouTube chat right now. So that's going to do it for us here, guys. This is it. This is my final NBA regular season game coverage of the year. But don't fret. We've got baseball season coming up. And then, of course, there's going to be the NBA playoffs. There's going to be the NBA play-in tournaments. We're going to have all of that covered on this YouTube channel as well. But if you haven't checked out our baseball product yet, we've got a great deal right now. Sign up using the link that we have below. 9 days of our baseball product for $9. Our ownership projections, our player projections, top stacks tool, top pitchers tool. That kind of data is invaluable to me when it comes to building baseball lineups. It's something that I'm going to be doing in about 3 minutes. Here, I'm going to close out the show, going to talk to my friends here, Ryan and Jacob, and then I'm going to build out some baseball lineups using the data we have on the site. So if you guys haven't checked that out yet, use the link below, sign up. $9, 9 days of all of our baseball tools. Also pretty good because there's going to be some days where there are off days for basketball in the coming weeks. So that does it for us. Guys, thank you very much for supporting all our content this year. Not really going anywhere, but it's the end of the regular season. If you haven't done yet, like the video, subscribe to the YouTube channel. Good luck, and hope you guys have a great rest of your weekend.